Whoa. Let me get this. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I want to update everyone on two topics: the investigation we announced on Friday and the 2020 end of the year crime statistics. As we stated on Friday, we were made aware through a member of the department that they saw social media pictures of other SPD officers, apparently in Washington, D.C., the day of the attack on the U.S. Capitol building. After receiving the photos, I shared them late Thursday night with the Office of Police Accountability's Director, Meyerberg, and asked him to review. On Friday, when it was clear an investigation would be needed to determine if they did or did not participate in the violent events or any violations of federal law, I decided it was essential to our commitment to transparency and enhancing public trust that we share this information with the community. I cannot go into the details of the investigation now that is under the purview of the OPA, but I can clarify a few points. When I referred it to the OPA, it was not apparent exactly where the photo was taken or if those in the photo took any part in attacking the U.S. Capitol. I placed identified officers on administrative leave because of the significance of what occurred in Washington, D.C. I did this considering that participating in a political event on their own time, out of uniform, violates no policy or law. I do not want to limit anyone's ability to lawfully participate in First Amendment activities. The large number of people who forced their way into the Capitol connected to the earlier political rally presented too much of the unknown about whether any of our employees had potentially violated federal law. That is why I had to act. Given the seriousness of what took place, out of an abundance of caution, I asked OPA to conduct an investigation. If OPA finds any evidence any officers were directly involved, they will be fired, and the information will be shared with federal officials. I made it very clear when I assumed this position that any violation of community trust or any action that threatens our ability to serve this city will be met with full accountability. We cannot violate the same laws we are sworn to protect. We cannot allow violent or intimidating direct action to become acceptable in our society. If any SPD employee participated directly in assaulting the U.S. Capitol, I will terminate them. That is an important point to end this part of the press event on. This department does not believe in or support this type of behavior. About 1 month ago, we announced we are joining the National ABLE Project, the active bystander for law enforcement training out of Georgetown University of Law Center. SPD has been looking for an effective training in this area, and the Office of Inspector General also recommended implementing such a program. This training gives SPD employees the skills and tools to prevent misconduct, reduce mistakes, and promote health and wellness. It helps employees know how to overcome the very real inhibitions we all face about calling out other colleagues if they're doing something we know is wrong. In this case, we know about it because another employee told their chain of command. They saw behavior that they thought might violate the values of this department, and they spoke up. And I thank them for that. Even if nothing against policy or law happened in this case, it needed to be reviewed. This is the type of accountability we expect. We will take some questions on this at the end. Now I want to shift to updating you on 2020 year-end crime trends. As we all know, 2020 was a year like no other. And for that reason, I'm not putting a lot of stock in most of the crime numbers. Due to the pandemic, we all changed our behaviors. Stores closed, people stopped going to their places of work, bars and restaurants were severely restricted. We also know, both because of COVID and other events, that the number of 911 calls dropped throughout most of the year. So telling you that certain reported crimes are up or down compared to 2019, I believe has less meaning this year than any other year. Nonetheless, we are sharing for you information online, the current year-end reported major crime stats. I want to focus on where we ended the year in homicides. First, because any loss of life is unacceptable, and because we know from research that almost all homicides will eventually become known to police regardless of what happens to the reporting of other crimes. Across the country in 2020, cities reported significant increases in homicides and shots fired. Almost all major cities had significant increases. Some reports show murder increased 36% in 2020 compared to 2019 across the United States. In Seattle, we ended in 2020 with 50 people who were willfully murdered. In 2019, there were 31 individuals killed. That represents a 61% increase, or 19 additional people who were murdered this year. This was the highest number of murders in 26 years. This is unacceptable, and we cannot tolerate this level of violence. Our homicide detectives also investigated 2 delayed deaths resulting from injuries sustained in 2015, and they investigated the recovery of bodies on Alki where individuals were killed outside of Seattle. I want to thank our officers, crime scene detectives, our investigators, and homicide detectives for doing such incredible work. They've worked every one of these cases with exhaustive effort and have successfully brought justice to the families of those killed in a majority of these cases. 60% of 2020 homicides were committed with a gun, compared to 66% in 2019. Most of the victims are male, between the ages of 18 to 29 and 30 to 49. And most, the number 25, or 49%, were black. I'm not going into the multiple theories I'm aware of for why we and other cities had such a large one-year increase. There's no one clear explanation. But I do know the department is working to decrease the violence. We continue to submit the recovered shell casings and crime guns to the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, which is known as NIBIN. This year, we logged over 240 hits or connections to other criminal events with a gun, and over 150 were directly connected to crimes in Seattle. For the 4th year in a row, we took over 1,000 guns off this street. Late last year, Chief Bess and I asked the King County Public Health Director Patty Hayes to help convene a meeting to approach our gun violence issues as a regional public health approach. Over the last year, SPD has been a partner at the table outlining all current efforts and gaps in the system for preventing and responding to gun violence, both with and without the involvement of law enforcement. We're working with city partners and community regarding shot-fired instances, so trusted members of the communities experiencing this violence can respond, make connections, offer services, and help end the violence. For those individuals intent on committing gun violence, we're working with the King County Prosecutor's Office and the United States Attorney's Office and ATF to refresh task force that have been successful at taking dangerous individuals off the street. These efforts are being guided by a commitment that addressing violent crime does not need to mean high levels of enforcement in our communities already suffering. We're focused on the individuals we know that are carrying the guns, calling shots, and pulling triggers. We know that associations with guns increase the risk of being injured or killed. To build a community capacity that can prevent future violence, we have to stop the bleeding right now. Illegally carrying or using a gun needs to come with the highest levels of accountability so we can create the space for services to hopefully more permanently end the violence. At the end of 2020, we saw the numbers trending down, and we're committed to a 2021 that not only has lower numbers than the highs of 2020, but the relatively low numbers of 2019. I know that officers are out there doing the work, responding to the shots fired, taking guns off the streets, and working with community to reduce the frequency of people carrying guns. This work will take more input than just the police department, but we will continue to do our part. Thank you, and I will now take questions.
I wanted to ask, of course, about the gun violence, but of course I do want to go back to the police officers. So you say that if you find, and I was thinking, and I want to make sure I understand this, do they have to have reached the Capitol for you to fire them?
So if they were directly involved in the insurrection, and that is, participating in the actual altercations that were occurring with the Capitol Hill Police, then that is part of the federal violation of law, and so that is what we will be looking at. That is what will be part of the OPA investigation, to see what level of involvement that if any SPD officers were participating in that level of involvement. If they're at a peaceful public rally or political rally, that is not the issue that I have at hand. It is that are participating in the actual violence that is actually at the U.S. Capitol.
And that's whether or not they reached the Capitol. That's what I'm trying to find out. So I think there were some altercations on the steps, and maybe not all of those people went inside. So I just want to get an understanding of how much of an involvement need they have for them to lose their job.
I think we'll have to see that on the actual cases, and to see if any of them actually participated in some level of altercation, as you mentioned, at the steps of the U.S. Capitol, to see what is also the violation of potentially federal law, and and that's where we would then work with the U.S. Capitol Police and Washington D.C. Police to determine if there is any level of violation.
Might they be disciplined in some way other than losing their jobs?
I would have to look at what the violation is.
Chief, you've identified 2 SPD officers, is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you tell us anything about them, how long they've been on the department, their ages, anything?
At this time, no, because we don't know if they've done anything wrong. And that is the reality of it. Right now, the officers are one of the officers that had come to us. There was no specific information that says that they were actually engaged in any part of the insurrection. However, because of the events on Wednesday, it was very clear that I still had to make some level of action to determine until we fully determine what was actually done.
Chief, you said that there were social media posts. Are these posts that the officers shared themselves? And secondly, did they ever voluntarily give this information to the chain of command at any point that you're aware of?
The second part, I don't have the answer to that. The first part, it was a social media post that they posted online.
Chief, Jose Moreno, CNN. What type of protection is being offered to the person that came forward to provide those particular posts as you continue to create that shift in culture and the ability to provide people with a safe outlet for them to report other people? What are you guys doing to protect that and then to encourage that going forward?
Yeah, so we do not relay the information about who's the specific person that actually relayed that information to us. That is number one, to give some level of protection to that employee. But also it's our level of encouragement and our appreciation for any officer that reports any level of wrongdoing. And so we want to, even for me, my own public acknowledgement of that type of action. And then we're also pushing out our training, which is also a big component to making sure that we, create that foster of good culture in our department for people to report potential issues of violation of policy or law.
Chief,
among officers.
Clarify, was it an actual SPD officer or an SPD employee who brought these photos to your attention? And was it just one person or multiple people that brought it to your attention?
So I know of it being an employee. I can't determine if it's an officer or an employee, but I do know it was an internal. It came through us internally. It actually came up to Chief Mahaffey from the Operations Bureau. And then we actually discussed it on Thursday evening and then presented it to the Office of Police Accountability.
And are those officers on leave now, or what's?
Yes, they're currently on administrative leave.
How does it feel for this to be happening in your department, right? There's been a summer protest. Clearly there's some officers leaving because of everything that's going on politically. So now to see this happening, how does it feel as interim chief to hold all this?
It's a very difficult situation that we're in. Number one, we did lose quite a few officers throughout this last year, and good officers that are working really hard And, that has been very difficult for us. Then to potentially have officers that only an allegation, I mean, we don't even know if they've done anything wrong, participate maybe in this U.S. Capitol insurrection. And I hope to think that our officers will make good decisions both on duty and off duty. And I'm committed to ensuring that our culture, that we address every aspect of that in our department. And that's the reason why I acted very quickly to ensure that, number one, this gets investigated, and that people know that I'm not afraid to hold people fully accountable if they are doing wrong things. And so I know that people might question, like, did I come out too quick? Because we didn't have everything that is, and the officers might not have done anything wrong. That very well could be, but I feel after Wednesday and seeing something that to me was unprecedented in our history, I couldn't let it just go, and so I had to make an action.
Chief, there's also been questions about Mike Solon, who is the head of the Seattle Police Officers Guild. He, in at least one of his tweets, blamed Black Lives Matter. Then he said, well, he later tweeted, well, he was saying there were extremists on both sides who were there. There have been calls for his resignation. Where do you stand on that issue?
That part is the unions. There are the levels of union representation. My belief is that I will not stand for any level of direct action. And what we saw at the U.S. Capitol is that it was such a huge challenge to our democracy, and it doesn't matter if it's left or right. Like, we just cannot have that type of action in our country. And so, that's the stuff that we're focused on, ensuring that doesn't occur. And then internally, if I can't have officers be participating and being directly involved in that type of activity as well. So I can only speak to the actions of our officers, and not speak to what the union message might be.
Chief, going back to the comment you made about a lot of officers leaving the force, what percentage of those were already primed for retirement and took an early retirement, as opposed to the mass exodus that is being claimed in the area?
I don't have the exact numbers of those that were in the retirement, that were actually going to retire no matter what. What I can tell you is that we were actually going to be experiencing one of our lowest years of attrition up until the month of June. And we were in, I don't know the exact number, but we were at, like I said, one of the lowest numbers, and we had a significant amount that finished out the year that left our department. And to me, it's about the equivalent of the amount of officers that we staff either at North Precinct or even two smaller precincts like South or Southwest. And that has created a significant impact. It is it's not one of the reasons why, but I do know that patrol was already short. And it was one of the first things that I had done was to move 100 officers back to patrol. And it was also to create a community response group that could also be able to supplement patrol and be able to handle calls for service and handle the other things that are going on in our city. So I'm very grateful for everyone stepping up to the plate and being able to also help drive these numbers down when it comes to the shots fired. Because we were not able to really adequately address everything that was going on. So not only did we saw more officers leave, we were also able to get a good response on a lot of calls for service.
Chief, I do need to ask about the homicide numbers. You said that 49% of the victims, well, it's a larger number, 61% more than in the past. 49% of the victims are Black, and they, of course, make up a much smaller part of this city. What about the perpetrators, and are you making any headway in solving these homicides?
Yeah, so we are actually, and that's one of the things that we try to keep track of is how many cases that we're closing, that are resolving with bringing justice to the families, and FBI has a way of how they report out clearance rates. At this time, we're trying to make sure that we're meeting the FBI's guidelines of what that clearance rate is. But I can tell you we're above the national average in many of all of the previous years, and a part of that is just good police work. And typically we run into the high 70s of clearance rates, and that's what our detectives are currently working to make sure that they're solving cases and maintaining that high standard.
Are they there now?
Right now, we're just making sure that we're clearing up the numbers to make sure that we're in the FBI's guidelines, but I know that we're pretty close to those same numbers right now.
Have you been contacted by the FBI about this incident with the 2 officers? And second question, what is the policy around supporting, liking images that would involve what happened, the riots in DC? Are officers allowed to like an image, and could that be fireable?
Yeah, we have a social media policy, and we're currently right now going to be making sure that that's under review to ensure that there's, you always find that when you put a policy out that there could be gaps in that policy, but we would then review to make sure that there's no gaps in those policies. That off-duty conduct is sometimes that we have disciplined officers in the past for that. We've actually fired officers for social media posts that they have presented. And so our policy has been pretty restrictive, but we would have to then look to see if there is anything that we're missing in that policy, just like kind of the likes or other things that might be associated with that.
And the FBI question, have they contacted you?
No, they have not. They have not.
Can you talk about some of the trends in last year's homicides and then in 2020 prosecutor, the Attorney's Office is really concerned about domestic violence. In years past, we've seen a lot of homicides and homeless encampments, but this year it seems DD's really taken.
Yeah, so, there was a big concern in 2020 because, obviously more people are home, that domestic violence, calls for service go up. Our homicide, in 2019, we had 6 homicides for domestic violence. Last year we had, in 2020, we had 7. So it wasn't a significant increase. We saw increases in homicide in general, but one more than the year before isn't established some real big issue or underlying issue. We did see deaths in homicides in homeless actually go down. I believe the number that we have is 4, but we will actually provide a little bit more detail in that to you. But yeah, typically in the year before we did see homeless, or in 2019 we did see homeless deaths up a little bit, but last year it doesn't appear that trend still continued.
Mike Solin's been now heavily criticized by the mayor, former Seattle Police Chief and many others online about his Capitol insurrection tweets. In your opinion, has that tweet hurt SPD's relationship with the citizens of Seattle or lawmakers here as well? And do you believe Mike Solin is still fit to be the president of the SPOG union?
I run the police department, and I want to make that clear. Mike Solin does not run the police department. He oversees the union that does look at wages, working conditions, and benefits. And if there are statements that do challenge the levels of trust with our community, but let's realize that I actually run the department, and I am going to make sure that I hold officers accountable for any action that is not in the same values of our police department. But I know every day officers are doing amazing work. And I believe that all they want to do is just serve this community to the best of their ability, and that's what we're committed to.
Will you be able to work with Mike Solin moving forward?
He is the union president at this time, and I will be working with Mike Solin to address any other things that we need to do as a city, as a department.
You have talked about this a little bit, but what was your first reaction when you saw what was happening in D.C.? And I ask this because many of the people who were storming the Capitol, I believe, are people who support Blue Lives and have made that very clear. And yet here they were reaching the Capitol and facing, of course, the Capitol Police. 2 of his members, I believe, died. I know one died, and very publicly we know about it, and I think another one died. What were you feeling as you were watching that in those first moments?
Well, honestly, the things around, I think what you mentioned is, people supporting like kind of the Blue Lives and that kind of stuff. Wasn't thinking of it. I was just thinking how horrified to watch our society and watch people literally storm the U.S. Capitol. It cannot. There doesn't matter what they support. Doesn't matter. Like that cannot happen. We cannot have that in any level of our society. And so, there was a lot of frustration and anger and feelings internally, because it just, we find ourselves in such a divided society right now. And I think that we just have to find ways that we can unite again, so we, unite with each other. And so that's, and as a police chief, and having the opportunity to sit in this role, that's what I'm committed to. That is what, that's what the department needs to be pushing, is that how we build relationships with our community. And I can't have any actions of racism that, can stem or could be part of that issue. So I am going to continue to work to address all of those types of issues, and are committed to working with our community to make this the best city we could possibly have. One more question?
Concerning that the president of the police union shares such a sentiment that is so counter to what it is that you're trying to foster, which is unity and progress in terms of the relationship with the police and the many protests that we have around the city. I think sometimes, every day we're dealing with, some sort of protest. That's the Seattle way. We know that occurs. We know that happens. It's one of the things that makes the city great. We also do have, and we are dealing with different, sometimes direct action work that has focused on destruction and violence too. And I've denounced that level of violence as well, that has no message, that has no focus on pushing something that is positive and addressing, whether it's supporting Black lives or supporting something like we have all sorts of different causes, environmental causes or whatever that might be, and that's what we have to be able to do as a society, is to denounce the things that are wrong when it comes to like that direct action. And I've said that before, and I will also denounce what happened at the U.S. Capitol, and that's the type of action that we've got to be able to come out publicly about. So, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, everybody. Thanks.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.